Hello, and thank you for joining us. This is No Soundbites Allowed, and I am your host, Michael Boss. Dragon of the Southern Tier, I'm happy to be here with you today. It is Saturday, January 21st of 2023. It is approximately 6:30 p.m. as we are recording this, and I wanted to update the news that we had talked about yesterday, the Night of Rage, a supposed national event, at least in the minds of the progressives that have started this, that promoted this, to attack police, law enforcement, and civilians, American citizens, in their homes and their communities across this nation. That's a very dangerous thing to request. It's a very dangerous thing to try and promote, and we wanted to cover that with you because the major news stream media, they seem not very interested in this story, not in its fullness, and not how it's affecting you across this country. Now, before we get started on this update, we first want to mention, if this is the first time you're seeing our channel, we want to welcome you and we thank you for being part of our audience. We want you to know that every Sunday at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we do a live stream with you. We reach out on all the social media that the internet overlords will allow to be able to hear what you have to say about everything. Because we believe in the First Amendment. We believe in your right to talk about the issues that affect you and hear your voice from anywhere in the world. Because the First Amendment isn't just an American thing. It is a birthright of everyone in the world. And whether your government agrees, whether the social internet overlords agree, we want to hear your voice every Sunday at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And we hope you will join us this Sunday. So to be able to update you, we first want to step backwards in time. We want to go 24 hours ago. That's when we made our announcement. We covered this first about the insurrectionist autonomous zone that exists in Atlanta, created back in 2021 and very active over the last several months, as many of its members are continuously being arrested for domestic terrorism in Atlanta. This is a story that hasn't gotten a lot of attention, although it has been picked up by, at times, the Rolling Stone and several other more left-leaning media, and in a more favorable tone, generally speaking. But as of this week, on the 18th of January, there was a shooting incident between members of Defenders of Atlanta Forest. This is the name of the Antifa organization, the far-left progressive ideology, that got into a shooting engagement with the police of Atlanta, Georgia State Police. Why did this happen? Well, as we detailed, it's because they were being cleared from land that they do not own, that is owned by Atlanta, the city of Atlanta. They were being removed from that property because the city of Atlanta had decided to create a facility to improve and expand the training of police, firefighters, and EMS, something that would benefit the city of Atlanta, that would benefit the poor and those who are facing high crime in Atlanta. This is a benefit to the city and to the citizens of Atlanta. The progressives didn't like that. They thought the trees were more important than the people. And the very same far-left organizations that said they want to have a better service of, or better interaction of police and law enforcement with the people of Atlanta are the very ones stopping that improvement from being able to happen. We covered that story in detail, going back the several months that this has been going on, covering even from the Rolling Stone about how violent this has been, that the Defenders of the Atlanta Forest and its various names have been actively violent against citizens, businesses, and law enforcement doing their jobs, following the will of the people, trying to improve Atlanta. That's just the facts. And we advise you to look at that video so you can see that in detail. But what essentially happened after January 18th, after one of the members of this insurrectionist autonomous zone, and we say insurrectionist because they are violating local, state, and federal laws. They have declared themselves separate of the United States, the Constitution, the amendments, and all laws. That is insurrectionist by definition, and it is treasonous. It is a form of domestic terrorism by definition. So these insurrectionists decided that because they engaged in a violent altercation again with police, and this altercation wound up costing the life of one of the insurrectionists, that their only recourse at that moment was to commit acts of violence throughout the city of Atlanta and against the people of Atlanta, as well as across America. We covered this, and most of the major news media didn't cover it or downplay this. They talked about the fact that Atlanta police were on high alert, but they really ignored, for the most part, as we could see, the fact that these individuals called for retaliation. As reported by the Daily Mail, you had to go outside the United States to see more of the full story here, that they were calling for reciprocal violence to be done to the police and their allies on January 20th. That they wanted violence across this nation, and that anyone who is a member of law enforcement and anyone they deemed to be an ally, someone who is not in complete compliance with their ideology, was therefore an ally and therefore a target of violence. They, of course, were removed from Twitter for this call to violence, rightly so. But what happened? What was the result? What has been the update since then? Well, let's start, first of all, going to the news. One of the articles that caught our attention today was published on January 20th, the same day as our initial video. This comes from Rough Draft. And Logan Ritchie says that Cop City, the facility meant to improve the police, the firefighters, and EMS for Atlanta, that is called Cop City by the protesters, by the insurrectionists. They're on a nationwide, they want to protest nationwide after the shooting in Atlanta. This article is very informative to us. Now, I have to say that looking over the history of articles by Logan C. Ritchie is not necessarily indicative of someone who would be left-leaning in their bias overall. But this article very much is. They start off with activists in Atlanta and across the United States are gathering in support of protesters who was shot and killed on January 10th on the property where the city of Atlanta plans to build a massive public safety training center. This is important. This first sentence, which is not a paragraph, but fair enough, tells us some information, but distorts information for the public. Yes, it is a public safety training center, which is a benefit to the people of Atlanta, and that's a positive. Why were the protesters there? They're activists. These aren't activists. These are criminals. They have broken local, state, and federal law. These are individuals who have rejected the laws of the United States, as reported by the Rolling Stone, the Daily Beast, and many other news agencies. These aren't activists. These are protesters. These are criminals. And they're gathering, and supposedly they're gathering across the United States, which isn't actually accurate either. Because they're not gathering across the United States. They're gathering in certain pockets of the United States, in progressive strongholds in the United States, but in Iowa, they're not protesting this. In Texas, they're not protesting this. They're not protesting this in Kansas or in Nebraska. You're not seeing protests in Philadelphia or Maine or Florida. That's not across America. So they go on to say, quote, while we understand this is a local issue, which it is, we also know this is a national problem. This is a global problem. How in the world is improving the police, fire department, and EMS, emergency medical services in Atlanta, a global problem? It isn't. In no way, shape, or form can that be confused. But the ideology that is being pushed here is that obviously, collectively, a problem for one area is a problem for everyone. And improving the police, the fire department, and EMS services for a community is a problem if it is not being done exactly in the manner that the far left would like. If it doesn't adhere to their ideas of gender politics, their ideas on diversity and equity, then it's not a positive according to them. Now, this is being said by Jasmine Burnett, organizing director of Community Movement Builders, an Atlanta Black-led collective that organizes against gentrification. Well, again, let's look at what is being written in this article. Who cares whether this is a Black-led organization or not? Why is that important? What is important that it is Atlanta-based, so it's local. And it's against gentrification, a local issue. Again, these are not global issues, these are local issues. This is a local organization dealing with a local question. And the fact that it's Black-led is meaningless. If it was white-led, if it was Hispanic, Asian, why would that change anything? It doesn't, unless you have a progressive ideology, and therefore the color of someone's skin on any issue elevates or detracts from that issue, essentially. Now, we'll get back to Jasmine and the community movement builders in a moment, but the article goes on to say organizers from Berkeley to Charlotte are ramping up protests and candlelight vigils to defend the forest and stop Cop City. 50 demonstrators gathered outside the construction firm Braswell and Gorey in Charlotte in June 2022. The following month, the doors were changed with bike locks, according to the Charlotte Observer. This is something that happened in June 2022. It has nothing to do with what happened in January of 2023. See, this is a way that the media pushes an ideology and makes you think that it has support when it doesn't, when it's not correct. They're telling you about an event in June of 2022. We're in January of 2023. What do they have to do with each other? Nothing. They're not connected. That doesn't show support. It has nothing to do with what happened in Berkeley. It has nothing to do with what's happening in Charlotte. They're not connected. But they want you to believe that there is support behind this so that you will support this, that you will think that this is something that is approved by the city of Atlanta, the state of Georgia, and people across the nation and the world. That is a lie. They are implicitly trying to change your mindset by the authority of the majority. They want you to feel there is a large movement, that the majority of people support this ideology, and therefore you should. They're manipulating you, and that's sad. Let me go on. More gatherings are planned for this week in Atlanta and beyond. Maybe, maybe not. That's not really being shown. Now, they go on to say, gunfire erupted in the forest when 26-year-old Manuel Esteban Paez Terran, also known as Torgu Tigita, was shot and killed. A Georgia State police officer was also shot, sending him to Grady Hospital, where he is recovering. 7 protesters were arrested and charged with domestic terrorism. Well, so he jumped from the fact that, let's start off with, he says, well, people are organizing vigils, and there are demonstrations back in 2022 that have something to do with, I don't know what. He jumps from protests to gunfire. There is no transition. That's because edited out of this story is the background that you need to know to make sense of this. Information that we covered yesterday. The background. How did we get to this event? How did someone die? They're just telling you about this man being shot, which should give you empathy for him. Because if you understood the background, you may not have that. Because the organizations that criminally took over the property, well, they have been having people arrested for over 7 months now, continuously. Well over 12 members of this organization have been arrested for domestic terrorism over those past 7 months. And then an additional 7 people were arrested this week in the same incident that Manuel Esteban Paez Terán was arrested. So that's important to understand. He didn't just get shot randomly. Gunfire didn't erupt randomly. This was something that was ongoing and escalating. It is established because at the core, these insurrectionists took over land that was not theirs. They engaged in acts of violence against innocent individuals and individuals executing the will of the city of Atlanta. That's important to understand. Accounts of Tehran recall a peaceful community builder who believes in nonviolence. They are trying to change your mindset. They're trying to make you believe that this is a wonderful, saintly individual. Whether Mr. Tehran was a saint or not, I cannot attest to. And we don't know where Mr. Tehran is or any of his background. We're never given that information, and I haven't been able to find that information in news media coverage of this event. No one's telling us where he came from, where he lived, his politics, his work, or anything else. So I can't tell you whether he was a saint, whether he was Gandhi born again. But they want you to believe that. But that's a manipulation, because we don't know that. And what we do know that even if he was Gandhi born again, a anti-violent individual, those he surrounded himself with and the movement he surrounded himself about was violent. Mr. Tehran was part of Defenders of Atlanta Forest, an organization that was actively recorded by the Rolling Stone magazine itself in September of 2022 as initiating acts of violence and escalating that violence during the time that they have been taking over this property illegally and trying to separate themselves from the local, state, and federal laws that in Georgia. They're insurrectionists. A violent group of insurrectionists. So I don't know how peaceful he was if he was advocating and supporting individuals who weren't peaceful. Going on, Camus Franklin, founder of Community Movement Builders, said on Democracy Now! That protesters were sitting in tree huts. Well, wait a minute. That's interesting because I actually looked up that link. This is the article. This is where they link to directly. 6 charged in Atlanta with domestic terrorism for protesting Cop City training facility. This interview on Democracy Now! Came out over a month ago. This is from December. So this has nothing to do with what happened in January. This has nothing to do with the people involved in the incident in January. And it confirms that for several months, these individuals have been arrested for domestic terrorism repeatedly because they violated local, state, and federal law, and they were violent in their actions. I think that's important because if you're looking at this article, Logan does not mention that this is an old article, that this was an old interview that had nothing to do with the reality as of January 2023. Again, this is a manipulation. They're trying to tell you that they were sitting in tree huts in December when they were arrested for domestic terrorism. Something doesn't sound right. That has nothing to do with what happened in January. Were they sitting in tree huts in January, a month after this statement? They go on to quote, "These folks were doing absolutely nothing but being in force as far as defenders at the time of their arrest." Well, that's factually not true. They aren't defending the forest. They invaded the forest. They circumvented the law and the lawful decisions of the city of Atlanta. They weren't defending anything. They were breaking the law. They're aggressors. Let's get this story correct. And even if Mr. Franklin wants to believe they were defenders, his comments are coming from December of 2022, not January of 2023. So he doesn't know if in January of 2023 that they were doing absolutely nothing but being defenders. He cannot, and that cannot be said in this news article. But this is what they want you to believe. They want to take this information out of context and jumble in the parts and pieces that they want to present to push this ideology to you. Now, they go on to say, Through social media, plans have been made in Austin, Minneapolis, Nashville, Chicago, Charlotte, New Haven, Berkeley, and Portland, calling for a night of rage. In Charlotte, protesters are planning to gather outside the Bank of America Plaza, calling for people to close your Bank of America accounts. Well, that's interesting because that's not America. That's progressive cities in America: Austin, Minneapolis, Nashville, Chicago, Charlotte, New Haven, Berkeley, and Portland. It's interesting that these are exactly the same cities that in 2020 and 2021 had autonomous zones that were responsible for the deaths of children in some cases, that resulted in tens of millions, if not billions of dollars, depending on the city, of damage to low-income communities that will affect them for decades. That these were the centers of the largest and most devastating protests and violence and autonomous zones in America in 2020 and 2021. You notice they don't mention Kansas. They're not mentioning Nebraska. They're not mentioning Virginia. They're not mentioning New Jersey. They're not mentioning Idaho, Utah. They're only mentioning these centers of progressive activity. It's very important. So they want you to think it's everywhere, except it's not. And it's not even in most of the places that they would want to claim it was in. Protests have been active since 2021, when the police facility was approved by the City of Atlanta officials under former Atlanta Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms. The training facility will have a mock-up of a town, a firefighting training tower, emergency vehicle operations course, classroom space, a firing range, and space for an emergency helicopter landing. How is that bad for the people of Atlanta? Why are they protesting this? Why is it bad to have training facilities for police and firefighters and emergency medical services that reflect a town and the kinds of situations that these individuals would have to operate under? How is that negative to make them more reactive and better at reacting to the needs of the community? That is authorized by a mayor of Atlanta in 2021. That the city of Atlanta approved this. That the people of Atlanta, through their elected officials, approved this. Why do they, the defenders of Atlanta forests, get to reject this? Why do they get to determine what the people of Atlanta are going to be able to have or do when the people of Atlanta have already made their voice clear? Who gives them that right? Who gives them that power? These are the same people who reject all local, state, and federal laws, and now they want to impose their will on the city of Atlanta since 2021 because they think so, because they desire it. That's kind of upsetting. Now, they go on to say, civil disobedience is not accepted when the police want to build a highly militarized training ground. Well, first of all, they haven't verified that this is a military training ground. That's not accurate. It is accurate that police, local law enforcement, are being trained to be better at being police officers, at dealing with the needs of the local public. Isn't that what they want? Don't they want better responsive, better connected police that are better able to justly enact law enforcement? Don't they want better firefighters to protect the people in low-income communities from the ravages of fires? Don't they want better medical services that could help save the lives of people in low-income communities? Isn't that a good thing? But yet it's highly militarized because they don't like it. They would rather see people suffer from less trained police officers by less trained firefighters and EMS. Individuals would not be as capable or as highly capable of taking care of low-income communities throughout Atlanta. They would prefer people die rather than be trained because they don't like people being trained in things they don't like. That's sad. Now, the Atlanta Solidarity Fund, an outside group, is going to take care of this. Fantastic. They're going to help bail out these individuals, much like we saw that Danny Glover was helping to fund releasing criminals from jail, paying their bail, which resulted in a murder. That because Danny Glover and other progressives who believe in no bail for these criminals, even as they commit violent crimes, release them all, because that's the good thing to do. That's social justice. And the result of that is more crime and more violence and death. Now, I want to address something. So I've gone through the essential elements of this story. Logan C. Ritchie hasn't done their homework. They have put together a propaganda piece that was meant to change your mind, to manipulate you by not informing you of all the details, as we have previously done yesterday, going backwards in time several years, to make sure that you are well informed. Ritchie doesn't want to do that. Ritchie wants you to agree with the protesters. Ritchie has an agenda. Now, I did look up the Night of Rage protest, and I'm looking for, this is supposed to be a national outreach. This is supposed to be a national statement. Again, this is supposed to be a national act of violence against law enforcement and anyone that is called a, quote, ally of the law enforcement, law-abiding citizens. That's who they want to attack. To attack. This is a call for violence. So, who across America actually supported that? And so we look up Night of Rage protests, and I'm going to update this while on the screen with you so you can see the most recent update. We see that the Atlanta Journal-Constitution wants to say that this is a national issue. Police training site protest has national reach 21 hours ago. It's not a national issue. It's not a national issue because no one in California, in New York State, in North Dakota, people who are in Mississippi are not affected by whether or not police are better trained in Atlanta, whether the firefighters in Atlanta are better at doing their job, whether EMS services are able to better serve and save the lives of people throughout the city of Atlanta. That is not a national issue. Whether or not a couple of trees are cut down in Atlanta does not change Oregon, does not change Nevada, it does not change Michigan. That's just a fact. But you are meant to believe this. They're trying to change your mind. So looking over the news, we look at the Washington Examiner, Daily Mail, WSB TV, Fox Business. Do you notice there's a trend so far? New York Post, again, Fox News Atlanta, The Daily Beast, YouTube, AJC, Rough Draft Atlanta, which is a story we just went over, WGN TV. Well, that's not a story about this. In fact, if we look over this again, not only do we see that what's missing from here, MSNBC, NBC, ABC, CBS, CNN, where are the major news media? Where's the New York Times talking about this? They're not. They don't want you to know about this. They don't want you to look at the details. They don't want you to investigate this. They want you to obey. They want you to believe that this is a positive. In fact, they don't want you to even know it's happening, because then you would have to ask a question as posed by the Daily Mail and revealing the actual thing that was said. This is a call to violence. Do you support random violence to back up a political ideology? But looking at this, when we look through this again, what we notice is there's a few of these stories are from 2 days ago and recent, but we notice that Night of Rage, well, that's June of 2022. Going on, we see that when we do see some of the news stories, WGN TV, well, that's a story from, again, June of 2022 in Portland, Oregon. June of 2022, Night of Rage. Well, that's a pro-abortion issue. Has nothing to do with this. So, in Iowa, the Daily Iowan is talking about a Night of Rage in June of 2022. We see the Wall Street Journal is talking about the Night of Rage, about abortion in 2022. Nationwide protests, but no Night of Rage. coming from WGN in 2022, The Independent out of the United Kingdom, July of 2022. Why? Because of Roe v. Wade. It seems interesting to me at this point to mention that these individuals took the term Night of Rage because there's a bunch of news stories already about Night of Rage. That they were engineering this to make it seem like there's much more coverage and much more support nationally for their issue because they co-opted a name that was already in the search engines, that was already being used. The Night of Rage was about abortion. That was the conversation in America in 2022. By co-opting that, and if anyone were to casually look through this, they wouldn't notice that the articles across this country, mostly isolated in progressive cities, is actually talking about abortion. And even then, the Night of Rage failed, overwhelmingly failed. This is a failed subject, but it makes it look more credible. It makes it look like it has more support across this nation. It doesn't. And the news media, the major news media, overwhelmingly has avoided this topic. They don't want you to know. So we went further. We said, well, wait a minute. What about Atlanta violence? Let's see. They claimed, and they put out the message that they wanted Friday, January 20th, to be a night of violence, a night of random attacks against citizens. How successful were they? How many people in Atlanta decided that was the thing they needed to do, that they needed to band together and act in violence against their neighbors? It didn't happen. Overwhelmingly, looking at the news, while the police were on high alert, some news media did cover that without covering why this was happening. For the most part, we saw that the people of Atlanta, the very people that these insurrectionists have been telling you support them, that they are looking out for their best interests. The defenders of Atlanta Forest failed to motivate the public. The city of Atlanta rejected them overwhelmingly because the city of Atlanta does not believe what these insurrectionists believe. Now, the response to that has been that not only did these insurrectionists turn around and have to create a brand new Twitter site or another Twitter site because their initial one got thrown off of Twitter because it was a call to violence, they changed their message. Because now their message is Saturday, January 21st at 5 p.m. When their initial call to action, which was for the 20th of January, as reported by the major news media, they changed their message to the 21st, to underground, secretly come and meet together to enact their violence on the 21st because no one showed up on the 20th. They didn't get the support. I think that's important to highlight, that they keep changing the goalposts. They use a name that someone has already used to try and co-opt that level of success, that level of attention across the nation, to try and co-opt that for their ideology that isn't being supported, that people do not believe in. For 7 months, more than, since 2021, people have ignored this, do not support this. They are not behind this. But yet they want to believe that they're successful, that there's a national movement to support their ideology. It doesn't exist. And then they're moving the goalposts on the days that they are doing this to make you think that, well, it didn't happen on the 20th. Well, it wasn't because we did it on the 20th. It's going to happen on the 21st. See, you were lied to. We were always planning to do it on the 21st, even though we advertised and all the news media are well aware that we said it was going to be the 20th. They keep changing things to try and make it look good for them. So in one of the few stories that actually was covering more about this, going to Fox Atlanta, we know that following up on this story, a gun was found, which was responsible for shooting the Georgia State police officer, and it was found on the site. And that was in the possession of Manuel Esteban Paez Terán. So we know it was found in his possession. And the bullet matched that gun, which we are told by the insurrectionist, well, no, he was innocent and he never fired. That the initial comments from them, as we covered yesterday, well, they said that police fired on their own, that it was friendly fire. Well, the evidence, as it seems, as being reported by Fox Atlanta, is that's not true. Mind you, in Georgia, you have the right to conceal carry. So Tehran wasn't breaking the law by concealed carrying, he was breaking the law by firing. And that's an important thing. Now, skipping through the story, which basically covers everything we've covered already, what they don't note is any actual acts of violence by this organization. No one came to support them. But most importantly, at the end of the article, 6 people, an overwhelming majority from out of state, have been taken into custody at the site, at the Cop City site, since the training facility was approved by the Atlanta City Council in October of 2021. 6 people have been arrested repeatedly, over and over again, something that the major news media do not mention enough, and I think is critical to the story. 6 people, 60 people have been arrested, and they say 7 more were arrested on Wednesday's operation. In fact, you could say it's 67 people. That's the reality of what we're seeing here. Now, again, a month ago, in the conversation with Democracy Now!, this wasn't covered. They're all peace-loving individuals that are saints and do nothing but sit in trees. Except these peace-loving people who sit in trees are also throwing Molotov cocktails, as admitted by the Daily Beast, as we covered yesterday. But you may say to yourself, well, Mike, but what has happened? Isn't there support across this nation? What about those cities that they mentioned? Austin, Berkeley, Minneapolis. Let's take a look at some of those. The fact is, if you look at Austin and the protests in Austin, and again, I will update this as I'm doing this with you. You can check yourself. They mentioned a police training site, but there's no one protesting it. The news media have nothing to say about this. All across Austin, no one is involved. They don't care. That's just the reality. According to local and regular news media, and I'm using Google just like anyone else, they're not doing this. Because this is about anyone looking at this protest, this night of rage, well, that's about what happened in 2022 about Roe v. Wade. That has nothing to do with what's happening in Atlanta right now. And another failure in Berkeley, a city that is known for its protests over everything and anything progressive. They have their own autonomous zone, their own insurrectionist uprising. They have nothing to do with what's happening in Atlanta, and they don't care. They're not having protests because of what's going on in Atlanta. In Atlanta, the people, the defenders of Atlanta forests, they're going to try and convince you that all these protests happening across America, they're all because of this, that all the stories about the night of rage are about what their movement is, and they have support. Even in progressive capitals, they don't have support. No one is talking about them. This isn't a national issue. This isn't an issue that anyone cares about. That's just the reality of it. And you can look for this yourself. But I did look through. And I even searched going in and I looked for Atlanta protests. What are the protests that are happening in Atlanta right now? And again, I will update this live while I'm on with you. Looking for the Atlanta protests. Where's the live streams? Where's the news story? Where are the independent media stories? We don't see that they are doing anything. They don't have actual support. The people of Atlanta do not support them. They just don't support them. There is one story of a March for Life rally in Atlanta a day ago. A March for Life. Organizers said even though Roe v. Wade was overturned, they plan to march every January. The march one day ago, 2023, wasn't about the night of rage, attacking other U.S. citizens, innocent people in their homes that have nothing to do with this. No. It was about Roe v. Wade. It was about abortion. How about this? We look for Stop Cop City. What is the news? Maybe they're doing live streams. Maybe they're doing coverage under that idea. No, there isn't. And you can look through this again for yourself. And I will again update this live right now with you. Is there anything? Stop Cop City. What is the news? Where are the stories? Where is the live stream? Where is the protest? There isn't. The people of Atlanta do not support this. So why should you? The people in other progressive cities across this nation don't support this. So why should you? Why should you believe that they have the right to go out and attack innocent individuals because they have labeled them an ally to their opposition? They have labeled people as an ally to law enforcement because they are law-abiding citizens. So let's take a look. You know what? I even went to Twitter. You can do this yourself. And again, this is from Twitter, Atlanta. Looking at the news, January 19th, they were talking about this, that there is supposed to be a Portland protest 3,000 miles away. But we've seen that there's been no news of that. In Pittsburgh, they were talking about having a night of rage, solidarity in attacking the police, in attacking individuals that support the police, that follow the law. They want people to go out and attack their neighbors because of people who broke the law in Atlanta. Except they haven't had any success. But there is images, there are video of what is happening in Atlanta right now. Here it is 1 hour ago. Shemaine Cruz, protesters are calling for the release of body cam footage of the shooting this week where a state trooper shot and killed an activist at a proposed site at Atlanta's public safety facility. Notice they changed the talking points here so that if you see this for the first time, this is the first time you're hearing about it, you're not hearing that these activists have called for violence to attack the police, law enforcement, and citizens of Atlanta. They don't want to tell you that. No, they want to change the story. And they mention it's a public safety facility. Well, they leave out the fact that they're labeling Cop City because it is, in fact, a public safety facility. So they're changing the story. They want to make you focus on, well, the police shot someone, an activist, at a proposed site. So they're trying to make you think the activist is in service of the public safety facility, not in opposition of it. They want you to think that the state trooper acted badly when all evidence at this moment says it's actually the insurrectionists, the defenders of Atlanta forests, the progressive that is wrong and doing the wrong thing. Okay, and we see that there's a small crowd. Many of them, if we are to go by what we see with Antifa, the individuals in the all black hoodies, these are members of Antifa. That's not the public. Those are Antifa members and support of the local Antifa outlook. Because the regular citizens aren't dressing that way. So actual citizens, the people of Atlanta, are very few. The members of Antifa are very large at this protest, which means the public are not supporting this. Let's go further. Is there anything happening right now? What has happened right now? And I believe we have some coverage. Here it is, 1 hour ago. Garris Davis says that protesters hit the Atlanta Police Foundation headquarters and a few banks in the area with fireworks and broken windows. 2 cop cars had their windows smashed, and then tons of Atlanta police officers arrived from multiple directions, at least a dozen arrested so far. What is the effect? So they switched the day from the 20th when no one took action and they had no support. And now Antifa has gone out tonight, the 21st, and they have attacked law enforcement. They have damaged private property. They have attacked banks. They have committed acts of violence. And this does not help the local community. If you cannot go to your local bank on Saturday or Monday next week because it's been closed down because Antifa went in and broke the facility, so it's not safe for you, and you can't access your bank account? Is that helping you? If the local police are not able to get to you because one of the cars that they would use to get to your emergency has been burned by Antifa, is that helping you? If the local police force has to direct its money towards fixing their facilities rather than trying to either have various programs or law enforcement to protect you, are you better off? I think not. And what people of Atlanta have been saying is they don't agree either. This is Atlanta. Eric Adams says, eyes on Atlanta tonight. This is one of the cop cars that was being burned down. I believe we have some other images here. Jordan breaking. Atlanta police set vehicle on I love the way he says Jordan Chariton, who's a journalist at Status Quo. Okay, independent journalist, fantastic, says, breaking, Atlanta police vehicle set on fire. You know, that's very weird, because the way they word that, it's like Atlanta, the place, police set vehicle on fire. Almost seems like two different statements. Okay, going on. Cop City protesters arrested during protest. And this is an image of what we have seen. I believe here is raw news first, 1 hour ago. At the time of this recording, breaking, protesters throw rocks at Atlanta Police Foundation building in Atlanta. They also set off fireworks and spray painted the building. Okay, so they've cost the people of Atlanta money because that's the city who has to replace and fix those properties. They have disrupted the city of Atlanta. They have distracted the Atlanta police from trying to protect the people of Atlanta to deal with this. These individuals are enacting acts of violence without any cause, without anything that's causing them to do this, to intimidate the public to bend to their will. That's not a positive, nor is that public support. The city of Atlanta isn't standing in front of the police stations. Look at this. This is empty. The people of Atlanta are not supporting this. The people of Atlanta are not backing their movement. And here's some additional news. Billy Heath III showing us the violence, the burning of property. Breaking news 24/7. Police vehicle set on fire in downtown Atlanta amid protests against controversial Cop City training facility days after officers fatally shot a demonstrator. They're not a demonstrator. They are criminal. They broke the law. So let me sum this up. And I've been covering this with you for some time to make sure we have a good understanding. And again, I ask you to go back and see the video that I did on Friday that included all of the background on how we got to this moment now. And now is the follow-up. And what I can understand and what I would say, the people of Atlanta do not support this. The people in Portland, in Berkeley, in Minneapolis, across this nation, even in the progressive centers of the nation, do not support this. These individuals are insurrectionists. They are criminals. That is because they have broken every local, state, and federal law. That is a fact. That they have been doing so since 2021. That, according to all media sources, at least 6 individuals have been arrested throughout this time since 2021. And overwhelmingly, these are individuals who have nothing to do with the city of Atlanta or the state of Georgia. These are people from other states coming to Atlanta to impose their will on the people of Atlanta. And they are not well received. They are rejected. They are impeding the ability of the city of Atlanta to better take care of their people. And they think they're the good guys because they say they are. I think this is a great example for you to understand what progressivism in America today is doing. They are demonizing you for following the law. They are targeting you for acts of violence, for not obeying their will. They are destroying your property and disrupting your way of life, for daring to pay attention to the details, and for opposing their draconian view of the world. I'm not telling you that the Georgia State Police are the best police in the world. I'm not telling you that they have an immaculate record. I'm not telling you that they are even right in this incident, which still needs to be investigated. Although the evidence at this moment appears to say that they acted correctly in this incident. Maybe that will change. But I can tell you that acting in violence against innocent individuals, the supposed allies of law enforcement, is not in the best interest of the city of Atlanta or American people anywhere. Destruction of property, public property, is not in the best interest of anyone. That these are acts of coercion, that these are acts of violence, that these are criminal, and these are the acts of terrorists. And we should oppose this. We should oppose this in Atlanta. We should oppose this in Berkeley, in Portland, Seattle, across this nation. We need to start calling out these autonomous zones for the insurrectionist centers that they are, and the proliferation of insurrectionist domestic terrorist ideology. You don't have to be a Republican to agree with what I've just said. You don't have to be a libertarian, a conservative. You can be a Democrat and agree with what I've said. If there is more news that comes out about this that changes what the story is at this time, I will be happy to go back and to follow it up. But in the meantime, I want to present this to you so that you have a clear understanding of how we got here from my video yesterday and what is happening now, so that when you see the spin tomorrow, you can identify the lies as clearly as it can be seen. If you disagree with anything that we have covered, any of the things that we have discussed, I will be happy to hear that. If Logan Ritchie would like to review their research and their article, I'll be happy to allow them to come onto this program and to debunk or to refute anything that I have said and anything that I have gone over in their article. I look forward to hearing what you have to say. And until then, I look forward to seeing you every Sunday at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to talk about this and other issues that actually do affect the world and America and our local communities. Thank you.